Unmuted Voices, the podcast, Season 1, Voices from the Womb. I'm your host, Lexii, and this is a space where the silenced will speak, the stories will flow, and the healing will begin. Each episode, we're going to share real, raw, and powerful experiences of Black women and families navigating Black maternal health to include pregnancy, motherhood, trauma, grief, loss, and everything in between. Because we were never meant to suffer quietly.
Hello, and welcome back. You are in for episode 4 of Unmuted Voices. I'm your host, Lexii. It's so good to see you guys again. As always, like I say, thank you for your time, thank you for your energy, and thank you for just being here and wanting to listen in. So we left off in the last episode, and I know it took me a while to record this next episode, but in the last episode, we were talking about my second pregnancy. This episode, we're going to talk about my last and probably final pregnancy, to be honest, because this one, it was a lot. So let's get into it. First of all, my husband and I were not looking to have another child. And I know that a lot of times we don't plan to have our kids. And it just happened, but we took it as a blessing from God. And nonetheless, we were hoping secretly that it was going to be a girl this time around. So with this pregnancy, I was high risk again. I got on my care like ASAP. Opted not to have a doula because after that last experience that I told you guys about, I wasn't doing that again. And I vowed that I was not going to get preeclampsia, if I'm saying that correctly. So my doctor said that it was like a 90% chance that I was going to get preeclampsia again because I had it the first time. And they were like, oh, it's inevitable, that you can't really avoid it. And I was like, devil's a liar. We are not going to get it. So with this pregnancy, I opted to make sure that I was staying as healthy as possible, as stress-free as possible. Like literally no one was going to break my peace of mind. No one was going to bother me. I smiled more. I actually worked out a great majority of that pregnancy too. The first trimester, like many others, is it was hard. It was rough. I was tired. I had no energy. I didn't want to eat meat, which was weird. There was a lot of food aversions that I didn't have in my first pregnancy that it was just like, this is different. But come my second trimester, I was in the gym and I was working out. Now, I worked out inconsistently before I got pregnant, and I would go to the gym maybe a couple times a month. But let me tell you, in this pregnancy, I worked out just about almost 3 to 4 times a week. As we got further down in the pregnancy, 2 to 3 times. And I felt good. I felt amazing. It felt great to bond with my child. We opted not to find out the gender. Again, so hoping for a little girl. So we worked as a unit. We had our son who was a handful. And towards the end of that pregnancy, he became even more of a handful. Nearing 2 years old and getting into that terrible 2 stage while also trying to navigate the world and trying to understand that there's a baby in mommy's belly, which I don't think he ever really understood. I think the first time I showed him a picture of the sonogram, he slapped it away. He did not want anything to do with that picture. It was very much hilarious. Yeah. So like the previous pregnancy, I did have a lot more sonograms, a lot more appointments. I also opted to talk to my job earlier about my pregnancy. I think I realized that a lot of the stress that I dealt with that could have been contributors to the preeclampsia and the end of my last pregnancy was from work. I had been dealing with horrible leadership, to be quite transparent, a manager who didn't like me, just difficult situations at work that didn't make anything better. So this time around, I was like, y'all not stressing me out either. I let them know very early on that I was pregnant. And I submitted for a reasonable accommodation as well, because again, I was a high risk pregnancy. Working and living in New York City, that travel using the train because I wasn't paying congestion toll and any other toll to drive into the city. And, parking is extremely expensive. Travel and commuting to the city itself would have been a lot of stress on my body. I was able to get a reasonable accommodation so that I could work from home remotely throughout the pregnancy. And it made things so much better. I have much better leadership now, and my team is a strong team. It's a trusted team. So I trusted them to also support me through this time. And my team was great. Everyone was extremely understanding in every aspect. And I was able to be just as productive as work, if not more productive probably than my last pregnancy. I got a lot more projects done and made a lot more headway on this. That's another part of everything. It's like it's hard being a full-time mom while also being a full-time professional as well. My husband also works full-time too. So that balance and having that support is definitely necessary in the process. So I'm very happy that during this pregnancy, I was able to get that. Like, it was amazing. I'm not gonna lie. This pregnancy was great. It was better than my first pregnancy with my son, if I'm being quite honest. I felt more connected to my baby. I felt happier. I felt peaceful. I felt like a lot of things were starting to align. My husband and I, we started looking for our house. During this time, we had this crazy thought that, we're going to close on the house before we have our baby. And you would think that it was a lot of stress that we put on ourselves in a very optimistic goal, but we made it happen in a sense. We did end up closing after the baby, but I'll continue to get into that story. But that in itself is like a journey I would love to talk to everyone about on a side note. But that pregnancy was great. I had, like I said, the C-section the first time around. So my goal was to VBAC, which is a vaginal birth after cesarean. And I would continuously tell my doctor every appointment, I want a VBAC. Like, I want a VBAC. And she's like, okay, well, we'll see, because you have to think of the different factors. You have to make sure that your pressure isn't high. You have to make sure that you don't have gestational diabetes and all of those different things that could prohibit you from having a successful VBAC. You also have to go into labor by yourself. It also has to be between 38 weeks. So no pressure, right? It was a lot of pressure. It was a lot of anxiety, but I was determined. I was determined to make my birthing experience the most beautiful one that I've ever had, because my first time just wasn't it. So, my husband is extremely supportive. My best friend was also supportive. I did say no doula, but when I really sit here and think of it, and as she probably watches this episode, she might yell at me after the fact, but I love you. She actually was my doula. She's beginning her journey as a doula, and she was finishing her courses. So I was actually like technically her first client in a sense. And she was able to come and be there with us when it came to that time for getting ready to meet our baby. So let's get into that story, because that's where things start to take a turn in this particular pregnancy. I was able to go into labor on my own. I was 38 weeks. Again, everything was perfect. I think I went into the doctors, maybe a week or so before that, and I was only like 1 centimeter. And I'm like, that sucks. So I was curb walking. I was still working out, still making sure I was stretching and squatting and doing everything. I'm like, we walking this baby out. This baby has to come out on his own. And like I said, we were in the process of also closing on our house, because at the time we were living in a 1-bedroom apartment. We knew we needed more space, but with another child added to the gang, we needed we needed even more space. So it was just so much going on. And I remember I started having contractions. I never really felt what contractions felt like with my first pregnancy, because I went to the doctors and they're like, oh, you need to go to the hospital and get induced. And then those were, I don't want to say not real contractions, but they were contractions that they made me have. So I didn't really feel them the same way. So when I started feeling these contractions, I'm like, well, this is different. I'm like, okay. So, I called her and I'm like, I think it might be almost time. Now, my best friend lives in Georgia. So her husband also works for Delta. Shout out to him, because she was able to be there so quickly once I was like, no, I think these contractions are real. I think something's going on here. So, she came, she flew down. I got her from the airport, and, we're driving around hanging out, because I still had to drop my son off And, I still went about all my days as if everything was normal in literal terms. Like when they tell you that, oh, you're pregnant, you should be resting. Yes, you should be resting, but that doesn't mean that you don't live out your life normally. That's one thing that I learned. And that was a big difference from my first pregnancy to my second pregnancy, because in that first pregnancy, I was very cautious. I was like, oh no, I can't do this. It might hurt the baby. And my second pregnancy, I was doing everything that I would normally do. And then also, I'm a toddler mom. Like, I have to do a lot in a sense. So, we went about the day and, the contractions started getting harder and harder. And I was determined to have my last meal. Ladies, let me tell you, do not eat a seafood boil before you go and have a baby. I don't recommend. Not a great idea. I'll tell you why in a little bit. But I wanted my seafood boil, and that's what I wanted, and it tastes so amazing. I also wanted some shaved ice as well. So the day I went into labor, we were actually supposed to close on our house the next day. And on that day that my best friend got there, they called us and they're like, the owner's not ready. For whatever reason, we can't close because they found XYZ issue. And I was pissed. But at the same time, I'm like, well, it doesn't matter anyways, because we're having a baby tomorrow, today, tomorrow, at some point, and I wasn't going to be able to go. And that was like the running joke throughout our process too, because I'm like, can we close in my hospital room? Because this baby in closing is just too close together and one is going to come before the other. So, the joke was on me because this time it was actually my fault. So we had to end up canceling the closing or postponing it rather, which was okay. So we ended up going to the hospital, let me see, maybe around 11 o'clock that night. And now that I'm thinking about it, I totally forgot. I did not have my son. My mom did. So I realized maybe like a couple weeks actually before I went into labor and gave birth, I was like, I just can't. Like, I need help. Um, our parents live really far away, so getting the help sometimes is not as easy, and not having a lot of people around and not wanting to burden people too. We have friends, we have family that are around us, but we don't want to burden them with our child. And I know they say it takes a village, but everyone has their own things going on. So my mom was so gracious, her and my dad, to come and get my son and pick him up. And he spent a good amount of time with them actually. He spent, I think, almost a month and a half with them in total as a whole. But they were able to come and get him to help us so we could prepare for the baby while we also packed our apartment at the time because we were anticipating moving too, because we were supposed to close before the baby came. So, all right, on the day that I went into labor, let me get back to it. We got to the hospital around maybe 11:30 at night. Now, I'm in pain, a pain I've never felt before. Like when I started crying and they were like, oh no, it's time to go. And good thing we went. So we got there. They started doing all the checks and everything, cervical check, like your 4 centimeters, we're keeping you. Also because I was high risk and they know I was trying to VBAC. The position of the baby, I made them check that this time because I'm like, we don't want any surprises. Is this baby in the optimal position to be able to come out? So we checked. The baby was great. Good. So now we're noticing that every time I have a contraction, the baby's heart rate is going down a little bit. So, we're monitoring. They finally get us into the room and we realize that I have not progressed. I want to say maybe 12 hours passed and I didn't really progress. And I did opt to get the epidural. And I want to say that honestly, I feel like the epidural slowed down the progression of my contractions, but also my contractions started getting real. They were real. And it was painful. And I'll be honest, I don't like pain. I didn't want to deal with it. So I did get the epidural, but from the time I got the epidural, it slowed down my contractions. So they did end up having to put me on Pitocin. And once they did that to start my contractions back up, we started realizing the baby's heart rate was dropping even more. So every time I would have a really hard contraction, the baby's heart rate would drop significantly, significant drops to the point like doctors were rushing in, nurses were rushing in, and everyone's like changing my position. they're like, okay, well, the baby likes this position if you lay in this position. And they have me laying in these different positions. And they're like, well, if the heart rate keeps dropping, we're going to have to do a C-section. So they did something else. And then I think like the heart rate dropped again. And I was like, all right, tag me out, take the baby out. Everything was going so well. I didn't feel defeated. I didn't feel like I failed myself, especially with the goal of trying to have a VBAC, because at that point it was making sure that I was doing everything that would benefit the health of myself and my child. So I opted to just have a C-section. I was like, okay, let's get him out of here. So we have the emergency C-section, and it's a boy. I may have accidentally almost said that earlier. It was a boy. When I tell you, my husband and I were very shocked because everyone was convinced there was a little girl in me for quite some time. But nonetheless, we were extremely happy, excited, and everything was going well. So, get to our room. He latches on perfectly. He's a greedy butt, so he definitely latched on perfectly. He's bigger than his brother. Healthy, beautiful, gorgeous little boy. And I'm not just exaggerating saying that because, he's my son. And then, sometimes babies sometimes look a little alien, like little aliens or something. But no, like he angelic, a little angel. Like I always called him my little angel. He is just an absolutely gorgeous little baby. But everything was good. I felt great. I didn't feel a substantial amount of pain from the C-section, but I was still, of course, on high doses of medicine. The epidural was still in me. And they're like, the next day you're going to feel some pain. So the next day comes. I don't feel C-section pain. I actually feel a different pain. So I'm feeling a pain up underneath my breast and on that right side. And I'm like, I don't understand why I'm feeling this pain. It's like kind of like not near my chest area, but it wasn't near my stomach. And I'm like, this is different. So, I'm there telling them, and they're telling me, okay, well, maybe it's gas. So, you're supposed to pass stool and pass gas after having a C-section. And I was unable to do either. Unfortunately, they told me I had an ileus. It's a rare condition that people experience post-op. And it really has to do with, not being able to move your bowels or pass gas, essentially. And they were telling me that it's this ileus thing. And I'm telling them, but the pain is right here. And I kept showing them where the pain was. And they just kept telling me, nope, it's this. So, days were going by. When you have a C-section, you're usually in the hospital for a few days. They don't just let you go immediately. They want to make sure that everything is good, that, post-op you're cleared, and obviously that you use the bathroom. That wasn't the case for me. So I'm just going through this pain, and days are going by. I'm asking and telling the doctors where this pain is. The pain is getting worse. There's no amount of pain medicine that they are giving me that would touch the pain at all. I couldn't lay down properly. I had to pretty much sleep sitting up almost, in a sense. Now, this is also while trying to take care of a newborn and, breastfeed, um, recover from a C-section, and they're making you walk. So they're like, oh, well, you got to walk, keep walking. So I'm walking the hallways. I'm still feeling the significant pain. I asked for a GI consult. They tell me that I don't need a GI consult because it's not GI related and they're taking care of it. It's an ileus. Now, this was a resident doctor that told me this. And it pissed me off because I'm like, but I have a history of GI issues in the past. Could something possibly have gone wrong? So they ignored my complaints. I continue to be in immense amount of pain. It wasn't until I think maybe my own OBGYN came in to assess and visit me and see how things were going that she's like, why are you still here? And I'm like, I'm in a lot of pain. So she orders, different labs. They finally order a CT scan, but then they also ordered a transvaginal ultrasound. Now, this pisses me off because you're ordering a transvaginal ultrasound, but you're telling me that after having this C-section in a baby, you're not supposed to have sex for 6 weeks. But you want to go and put this ultrasound scope up in my body vaginally. And the reason why was because they wanted to make sure they didn't leave anything in me. So they immediately went into, let's cover because we want to make sure that nothing went wrong in the C-section. So they're doing all of these tests from the lens of, okay, did we mess up? And in doing these tests, the CT scan came back. I think the first time the CT scan came back, well, the ultrasound, first of all, they did the ultrasound and they did do an ultrasound like in that upper area, I believe, as well at some point. And they saw that there was some fluid in my lungs. And they also saw some other things I don't quite remember. And I asked them, I'm like, okay, well, is there a possibility I have an infection because there's fluid in my lungs? And they're like, no, that's normal post-op. I'm like, all right, whatever. This pain gets worse and worse, continuing to get worse. Now, eventually, they come after the CT scan. And they're like, oh, your gallbladder is extremely inflamed and there's bile in it. So what does that mean? You got to get your gallbladder. So at this point, we're what, maybe a week in? I've been in the hospital for a week, I think, at this point, almost. Yep, just about a week. And it took them that long to figure out, well, there's something else that is there. So, they get me the surgery consult and they're like, yeah, we recommend that you remove it. Keep in mind, just a week ago, I had a C-section. And they're like, it needs to go. If you don't do it now, you're still going to be in pain. And eventually it will need to go. And me, I'm just like, I don't want to be in pain anymore. Take it out. Let me backtrack a little bit because I actually forgot. Now, with them thinking that it was an ileus and I wasn't able to pass gas, at some point they started pushing me with a whole bunch of laxatives, like oral, I think it was like Marilax. They were giving me stool softeners. They at some point did enemas. They did so many different laxatives to the point that when I did eventually start using the bathroom, I couldn't stop using the bathroom. So there was just so much going on. So eventually I'm like, I don't want to be in pain anymore. My husband and I were weighing the options. He was extremely scared, worried, as he should be. But, we had to make this decision. Did we want to go ahead and get my gallbladder removed? And I say we because I still take my husband into consideration, even though it's concerning my own health, because he also helps me to make those sound decisions. So together we decided, okay, yeah, it's going to be best if I do this now. So I got my gallbladder out. Immediately after surgery, things were starting to feel a little better. And, they discharged me. We were able to go back home. I want to say we were there for 8 days in total. I get back home. We're trying to recover. Luckily, my best friend is still there. My son is still with my mom, and she's helping us out with the baby while I'm trying to kind of get myself together and recover. She actually went home and flew back in once we got home. Thank God for her life, literally. And once we finally got home, the pain returned. This time when the pain came back, it was worse. It was way worse. Still in this exact area that I've been telling them. So I called the surgeon's office because I'm like, you guys told me once I have the surgery, this pain will go away. They're like, oh, well, have you been taking the medicine? And now they told me to alternate between Tylenol and Motrin for pain after having surgery. And I'm like, well, this isn't strong enough. So then they prescribed me, I want to say Oxy. And they're like, okay, well, try this. Maybe the Motrin is messing up your stomach or tearing up your stomach. We wouldn't know, but you can try the stronger meds. Just make sure you're taking stool softener so you can use the bathroom because it can back you up, et cetera, et cetera. I'm like, okay, whatever. I tried that. The pain is crazy. So now, you know, 2 weeks after you have a C-section, you have to go and get checked post-op in your GYN's office to make sure that your C-section is healing properly. I go to that appointment and it's actually the day before our closing day because we finally got a closing day. And I get to the doctor's office. I could barely walk. I could barely stand. They go to lay me down. And remember, with this pain, I could not lay flat at all, at all. Like I had to sleep sitting up and I was continuing to sleep sitting up at home. So I get to the doctor's office. They go to lay me down. I bawled out in pain. Like I was in so much pain. So I went straight to the hospital. My husband took me straight to the hospital after my doctor's appointment. And they were like, honestly, you shouldn't even have came here. You should have went straight to the hospital. So I went to the hospital. I get to the hospital. I still have a fever. Oh, forgot to mention, I had a fever throughout that whole time I was in the hospital too. So I had an infection that they couldn't figure out what the infection was. They had got infectious disease involved with my care, and they were pushing all these different antibiotics, but they did not know what infection I had. Let's continue to keep that in the back of your mind. So now I get to the hospital. I have skyrocket fever. My pressure, I think, was a little elevated. The pain was just ridiculously crazy. And then they're like, okay, well, they get me right in, automatically get me right back, given everything. Once we get in the room, they're like, okay, well, you need to go and do another CT scan. I said, well, I cannot lay flat. You have to give me medicine that is going to work and alleviate some of this pain before you put me in that machine to do a CT scan because I cannot lay flat. I was in that much pain. So they come and they came to take me to CT, and I'm like, I can't do this. Brought me back to the room. Finally, I got the medicine, some relief. I had to ask them and request for them to give me even stronger medicine because I knew how much pain I was in. And then finally, we do the CT scan. They get me back to the room and they're like, oh, well, it looks like everything is good where your gallbladder was. We're not seeing anything there. There's some fluid on your lungs, but that's normal. Keep saying that it's normal. And oh, we're still seeing that you have a lot of your bowels are full. And I'm like, but I'm using the bathroom. Like that's not the issue. Not gassy. I don't have gas. And they're like, they wanted to keep me for observation. I'm like, what are you observing? Your pain. I can observe the pain at home. You're not fixing it or telling me what's wrong. So my husband was like, okay, screw this. We're leaving because also our closing was the next day. So the deal was that we were going to go to closing and make it to closing. And after closing, we were going straight to another hospital because at this point, I need another opinion. I felt like the hospital kept looking at my case from a standpoint of what did we do wrong? Because again, they went straight to, oh, your gallbladder surgery is fine. Your C-section is fine. Nothing happened. You just have gas. That was not the case. Clearly, there was something more wrong. We get to another hospital and we started going through. I was letting them know what was going on. I didn't even bring any results or anything with me. I just gave them like the high level story to let them know. And I let them do their own assessment so that they wouldn't have any biased opinion and they would run their own tests. So once they got done running their own tests, come to find out I had post-op pneumonia. And that pain that I was feeling was from the post-op pneumonia. So finally, they got me the antibiotics that I needed. And I was finally on my road to my postpartum recovery. And again, that was after 8 days in the hospital, another two hospital visits, and two surgeries later. So I share all of this to say through each one of my journeys, I learned that you have to advocate for yourself. You have to ask the questions, and those around you, you have to have them advocate for you and ask the questions. And if they're unable to, you need someone on your side. If you know your body, and most of us do, we know our body, do not let them tell you that you're like pretty much delusional or you're feeling something that is not there or that you're wrong in what you're feeling because those doctors will make you go crazy. And I kept pushing and pushing and advocating for myself until finally I got the answers that I needed and the help that I needed. It's really, really sad that I was faced with well, you don't need a GI consult. But then turns out you're telling me my gallbladder needed to be removed, which still ended up being a GI related issue. And then, them telling me that, oh, there's a little bit of fluid on your lungs, but that's normal. Turns out that was post-op pneumonia. Now, did I want to sue that hospital? Absolutely. Did I try? Absolutely. No lawyer would take my case, unfortunately. But, that's what really birthed this platform and not wanting to be silenced from my experience and what I went through and wanting everyone to know that you can get the help that you need when you need it. You just have to find the right people to help you and just really keep pushing and advocating for yourself. That's like one of the biggest takeaways that I had. I think a lot of people can benefit and learn from some of the situations that I've gone through, which is why I wanted to share it. I'm really extremely excited for the trajectory of the next few episodes because we have a few amazing guests from, other women in their journeys to professionals within the maternal health field. Also, we might even hear the male perspective of a journey as well in this podcast. This particular season really is just focused on Black maternal health, as I had stated before, and voices from the womb. Maybe in the future we might get into other topics in other seasons, which I am excited about, but I'm also just really happy to share the information that I'm sharing with you all, share my connections with you all, my network of professionals that you'll hear from, the other voices that you will hear from. And I'm just really excited about this all. Like, this is something different, something new for me. As I think I mentioned, maybe like the first episode, I don't like really being in front of camera. And I'm really trying to push my own comfortability and my confidence to put myself out there because I feel like my voice is powerful, my words are powerful, and the things that I want to share with people is powerful and it can help someone. It may be able to help you feel like you're not alone or make you be able to feel like, wow, I'm actually not crazy when I felt like this was what was going on. No, you're not. And neither was I. So I'm just extremely happy about this. Again, thank you for your time, your energy. If this resonates with you, comment below. If you want to share your story, comment below or email me as well. I'm excited for these next few episodes to come, you guys. Like, this is something I talked about doing literally from my hospital bed. I planned it from my hospital bed during that stay. And I was like, I have to share this because this is just crazy now at this point. Like, the preeclampsia, that was out of my control. But this, I still question to this day, did I really need my gallbladder removed? Because was that really the issue? Because the pain that I was feeling was the post-op pneumonia. We will never know. But I am healthy. I am 3 months postpartum. I am happy. I am at peace. I have beautiful baby boy who is doing the absolute most. These post-COVID babies are just crazy. They're different, but it's been a beautiful journey. I have been working out. I have been feeling healthier than I've felt maybe ever before. Like, it has just been beautiful. And I'm really grateful for that. And I'm grateful for this platform, which also helps me in my postpartum journey to be able to heal. It's not all easy. I'm not gonna lie. It's been a rocky road, but it's been a beautiful journey. So thank you all for listening in again. Let me know if there is a topic that you want to hear about where it comes or information you want to learn more about in terms of this topic as well. Happy to kind of throw that in. But until next time.